But I think once you go to Burgundy and you taste through a lineup of wines, it's very difficult to come away saying that they're all the same, because they're not. But more importantly, when you go to Burgundy, don't be afraid to ask the vigneron that you visit, the winemaker that you visit, to take you out into the vineyards, because a really passionate vigneron will absolutely take you out there. And as soon as you go and you start looking at the different angles, the slopes, the wind that either blows or it may be sheltered from the winds, there are all these microclimat factors that come into play that change how ripe the grapes get or don't get. And so that's part of it, but also the color of the soils change. I mean, you can go. One of the things that I discovered when, because I started asking these guys to take me out, because I started going to Burgundy, my first visit there was 1979. And I went for about 10 years, and I was just comfortable hanging out in the cellars. But I finally started, because they would want to take me out after the second, third, fourth visit. They said, come on, you got to come see what I do. The viticulture is really, really important to these guys, and the best ones are always extremely passionate about their viticulture. So I started going out there, and I noticed that these guys would constantly bend over and pick up the soil, crumble it, and smell it. They'd smell their hands. And finally, I was curious, and so I asked the guy, I said, why do you do that? How interesting is smelling the soil? And his answer surprised me. He said, well, of course, young man, they all smell different. And I grew up on a farm, and I'm aware of how soil smells after a rain. It's actually quite pungent. But it never occurred to me that they smell different. And so, just for an experiment, I'm speaking of Grand Geshizo, I happened to be there after a light rain. So I picked up the soil in Grand Geshizo, and I smelled it. All right, that was one aromatic profile. And then I walked around the wall, because Clos Vougeot, the wall that separates Grand Geshizo and Clos Vougeot, is actually just a wall. So if you, it's only 50 yards to walk around. So I walked around, picked up the soil in Clos Vougeot, and damned if it didn't smell different. And so I got into the habit. And now I pick up the soil everywhere I go, and I make no pretension of being able to identify all of them, but I assure you that they're different. And so you can say, well, that doesn't necessarily, emphasis on necessarily, explain terroir. So no, that's not all of it. But when you start seeing these minute differences that occur almost everywhere between one vineyard and another, you start to believe that, well, okay, this is one of the most geologically complex areas on the face of the planet. That sounds like an exaggeration, but it's actually not. And while, again, I wouldn't argue that it's all soil-based, there are very, very different soils from one commune and from one vineyard to another.